And obviously you cannot capture this bishop on g5. This is because suppose after knight takes g5, h takes g5, and you can see now the h file is opened for this rook, which is taking complete control over this h file. And suppose if white pushes d5 attacking this knight, and since black has now multiple options either to go to b8 or maybe to a7, both are fine, but the best move for black is to bring this knight to e7 so that he can at any time push f5, launching an attack as well as breaking this pawn structure. But what if black captured the pawn on g5 by bishop takes g5? But guys, now we can simply go for f6, attacking this bishop, and after this bishop goes back to e3, knight to f4, providing a very strong outpost for this knight. And in the next move, this another knight will also join by going to g6. And suppose if white captured this knight on f4 by bishop takes f4, then after e takes f4, and in the next move, white will bring this knight to g6, and then he can go for king to f7 so that he can bring this queen to e7, and maybe he can double his rook in future. And by this you can see this position will be completely dominating for black. Okay, so in the actual game, after this move bishop to g5, so that's why after seeing this all, here Fischer brings his knight to e3. Now Fischer goes for h3, avoiding any pin like bishop to g4. Okay, so here some of you might be thinking of the move d5, which attacks this knight, but black can simply bring his knight to e7 so that he can push f5. By doing this, it will be better for black. Okay, so after that, queen to e7 by black. Okay, so now you can see black is threatening to capture this pawn on d4 so that he can capture the e4 pawn by his queen. So that's why after seeing this, here Fischer decides to take on e5. And now it's better for white to bring this bishop to c5 so that he can attack this queen, but instead he goes for queen to h5. Basically, he wants to capture this knight, taking advantage of the pinned f7 pawn. But guys, now comes the most interesting part of this game, because in this position, black very well knows that white is threatening to capture this knight and he cannot recapture due to this pinned pawn. But still he finds a god level move, knight to a5. But what's the point of that move? The point is simple, that if white captured our knight by suppose queen takes g6, simply knight takes b3. And obviously, since this queen is under attack, so white has to defend this. So after this queen goes back to h5, knight takes a1, and at the end, white has to lose his rook. So that's why after knight to a5, here Fischer sees this and he brings back his bishop to c2. Okay, so now you can see here white is targeting this queen. But guys, instead of knight to f5, here white must consider the move knight to d5. But why? Yeah, I know that this knight and this queen are also targeting this queen as well as this pawn on c7. But what if black simply captured this knight on d5 by bishop takes d5? And guys, if this happens, then after e takes d5, now you can see by this white successfully opens the diagonal for this bishop. And suppose if rook takes d5, rook at a goes to e1, and now black is forced to exchange this queen for two rooks, because suppose if he is not careful and instead of exchanging, if he slides his queen to d7, then simply rook takes e8 check, queen takes e8, and rook to b1. And you can see this knight and this pawn on b7 both are under attack, and white is also targeting this pawn on c3. And by this you can see this position is slightly better for white. Okay, so in the actual game, after knight to f5, and you can see now white is threatening to give a check from e7 square. So that's why, to stop this, here black brings back his queen to f6. Okay, so now it's better for white to push f3 so that he can add a defense to this central e4 pawn. But instead he decides to play rook to e1. And the problem with that move is now black finds the best move, knight to d3, attacking both rooks, and obviously now white is forced to capture this knight by bishop takes d3, and which actually happens in the game. And after rook takes d3, now you can see black successfully activates his rook, giving significant advantage to black. And now white has option to push f3, but instead he brings back his queen to f4, preparing to push e5. But firstly, here black goes for g6. And the only way to save this knight is queen to h6, which pins this g6 pawn. But instead of playing queen to h6, here Fischer made a huge mistake by playing rook to c5. And basically he goes for rook c5, because if black captured this knight by g takes f5, rook takes f5, targeting this queen, and basically this also destroys the safety of the black king. But the problem with this is, instead of capturing the knight, here black can also black can go for rook to e6, which ensures the safety of the black king, and completely destroying the hope of white. And now it's better for black to just start pushing these pawns, but instead he made a mistake by playing rook to e2. Basically, he wants to keep an eye on this pawn, but leaving the important d file is not a good idea for black, because now at any time this rook can enter the d file and infiltrate towards the black position. And now it's important for white to focus on just pushing these pawns, because the only main reason for white is only main reason for white is still in this game is for this connected pawn, but instead he still made a mistake by playing king to f4. This is because now black finds the best move a5. But pushing this pawn might be the better option for white, because now in this position here black sacrificed his rook by rook takes f3 check, and this is because after rook takes f3, bishop takes f3, and in this position Bobby Fischer resigned, because after king takes f3 now comes b4, trying to deflect this pawn so that black can promote his a pawn. And suppose if e7, white tries to promote, simply black can stop this by king to f7, and if takes a3. And you can see now no one can stop this pawn from promotion. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.